The sky had the wrong color for a place that was supposed to be stable. Sev noticed that first, before the noise, before the heat, before the very practical realization that something had gone catastrophically wrong. It shimmered in fractured layers of pale violet and ash gray, as if the atmosphere itself had been edited badly and left unfinished. He paused for half a second, squinting upward through the drifting haze, and muttered, "That doesn't look promising," which was, in his experience, the most accurate diagnosis available in the middle of a battlefield. Then something exploded to his left with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested it had been waiting all day for that exact moment. Sev ducked, more out of habit than strategy, and kept moving. Orders had dissolved 10 minutes ago, maybe 15. It was hard to tell time when every second came with its own personalized crisis. His comm unit crackled intermittently, offering fragments of instructions that contradicted each other in creative ways. Retreat, advance, hold position. Someone, somewhere, had even suggested remain calm, which Sev privately ranked as the least useful command in recorded military history. He stepped over a fallen drone that still twitched faintly, its optics flickering like it was trying to remember how seeing worked. The ground beneath his boots was uneven, churned into a mixture of metallic debris and scorched soil that smelled faintly of ozone and something sharper, something alien. Not ideal. Nothing about today qualified as ideal. A figure moved ahead, partially obscured by smoke that curled upward in lazy, defiant spirals. Sev slowed, instinctively shifting his grip on the medkit slung at his side. It wasn't standard for a combat unit to carry one this large, but Sev had long ago decided that standard was just a polite word for inconvenient at the worst possible time. At first he thought it was another soldier, someone separated from their unit, maybe injured, maybe just as lost as everyone else. Then the smoke thinned, and the details resolved. She was kneeling, not collapsed, not scrambling. Kneeling as if the battlefield had politely asked her to take a moment, and she had agreed. One hand pressed against her side, fingers darkened with blood that was the wrong color. Too luminous, almost metallic in the fractured light. Her posture was precise, controlled, as though pain had been given strict instructions not to interfere. Sev blinked. "Well," he said under his breath, "that's new." He approached slowly, boots crunching against debris that protested every step. Up close, the differences were unmistakable. She looked human, almost perfectly so, except for the ears. Long, elegant, tapering slightly as they extended back from her head. They shifted faintly, reacting to the distant sounds of the battle in a way that felt far too deliberate to be accidental. Her eyes lifted to him before he spoke. Calm, focused, assessing. Sev raised one hand, palm outward, in what he hoped was a universally understood gesture of, "I am not about to do anything particularly stupid." "Hi," he said, because his brain had chosen that moment to abandon any more sophisticated options. "I'm going to assume you'd prefer not to bleed out today." She didn't answer. That was fine. Sev had worked with worse communicators. He took another step closer, lowering himself carefully to one knee a short distance away. "I've got a med kit," he added, gesturing vaguely at the bag like it might introduce itself. "It's not, ceremonial or anything, but it works." Still nothing. Her gaze didn't leave his hands. That more than anything made him pause. It wasn't suspicion, not exactly. It was something sharper, more focused, as if every small movement carried significance he didn't yet understand. "Right," Sev said quietly, nodding once to himself. "We're doing the silent evaluation thing. I respect that. Very intimidating. 10 out of 10. Another explosion rolled across the field, closer this time. The ground trembled, sending a ripple through the debris around them. Sev didn't look away from her. If she decided to object, it would probably happen in the next few seconds, and he preferred to be facing the problem when it did. She didn't object. Her hand shifted slightly, just enough to expose the wound at her side. The movement was deliberate, controlled, and unmistakably permissive. Sev exhaled. "Good," he murmured. "That's good." He moved in, closing the distance with careful, measured steps. Up close, the injury was worse than he had expected. A deep laceration, edges uneven, as if something had passed through energy shielding before meeting flesh. The bleeding had slowed, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Okay, Sev said softly, more to himself than to her. We can work with this. He set the med kit down, flipping it open with practiced efficiency. Instruments unfolded in compact layers, sterile and ready, each one designed for a situation that never quite matched reality. He selected what he needed, hands steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. When he reached toward her, there was a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, where everything seemed to pause. Then his fingers made contact. Her skin was warmer than he expected. Sev didn't react, not outwardly. He focused on the task, cleaning the wound with swift, precise motions, applying pressure where needed, adjusting for differences he didn't fully understand, but could infer. Years of experience filled in the gaps where knowledge failed him. Bleeding was bleeding. Tissue was tissue. Pain, at least, seemed universal. You're doing great, he said after a moment, glancing up briefly, which is impressive, because this is objectively a terrible day. Her eyes remained fixed on his hands. Not tense, not hostile. Watching. Sev suppressed the urge to fidget under that gaze. If it helps, he added lightly, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing in terms of alien medical protocols. So if this violates anything important, I'm very sorry in advance. The corner of her mouth shifted. It was subtle, so slight he almost missed it, but it was there. Sev blinked. Was that? He started, then shook his head. No, focus. Don't get distracted by possible facial expressions. He worked quickly, sealing the worst of the damage, reinforcing the bandage with careful precision. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. He checked it twice, then a third time, just to be certain. When he finally leaned back, exhaling in quiet relief, the battlefield rushed back into awareness around them. The noise, the heat, the distant, relentless motion of a war that had not paused simply because he had. There, Sev said, brushing his hands together lightly. Not perfect, but significantly less catastrophic. He looked at her then, properly this time. Her gaze had not changed, still fixed on his hands. Still, something he couldn't quite name. Sev tilted his head slightly, curiosity edging past caution. Okay, he said slowly. Now I'm a little concerned. Is this the part where you tell me I've accidentally done something extremely important without realizing it? For a moment she did not answer, and Sev found himself increasingly aware that silence could be far more complicated than words. The battlefield roared around them with all the subtlety of collapsing machinery, but between the two of them, there was a stillness that did not belong to war. Then she spoke. You have already done something important, she said. Her voice was steady, low and precise, each word placed carefully, as if language itself required discipline. It was not accusatory. It was not grateful. It was simply true. Sev blinked once. That's concerning, he admitted. I usually try to avoid that sort of thing. Her eyes did not leave his hands. You touched me without request, without preparation, without... She paused, searching for a word that seemed less familiar to her than it should have been. Distance. Sev glanced down at his hands, turning one over, as if it might explain itself. In my defense, he said, you were bleeding. Where I'm from, that tends to move things along. I was aware, she replied. Good, Sev said, because I'd hate to think I misread the situation. There was that subtle shift again at the corner of her mouth, faint but unmistakable. Not quite a smile, but something that suggested the possibility of one existing in the same universe as her. Behind them, a transport vessel screamed overhead, trailing smoke as it veered sharply to avoid incoming fire. The ground shuddered, a distant impact sending a ripple through the debris field. Sev glanced up briefly, then back at her. So, he said, gesturing vaguely around them, this seems like a bad place for a philosophical discussion about personal boundaries. Do you have people? A unit? Somewhere I can drop you off where no one yells at me? At that, her gaze shifted for the first time. Not away, but outward, scanning the horizon with a focus that felt entirely different from before. Analytical. Commanding. They are searching, she said. Great, Sev replied, because I'd really prefer not to be responsible for... He hesitated and then frowned slightly. Whatever it is you are, no offense. None taken, she said, which somehow made it worse. Sev exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck briefly. You're very calm about all of this, he added. Most people I patch up either try to argue with me or pass out. Sometimes both. I do not pass out, she said. Yeah, I'm getting that impression. Another pause settled between them. Less tense this time, but no less strange. Sev shifted slightly, resting back on his heels, trying to decide whether he should stay or go, or pretend he had never been here at all. The last option was appealing, but probably unrealistic. You're not from this sector, she said suddenly. Sev raised an eyebrow. That obvious? You do not recognize the structure of the battle, she replied. You move as if it does not concern you. Sev considered that for a moment, then shrugged. That's because it mostly doesn't. I got reassigned 3 times in the last week. At this point, I'm just trying to survive long enough to complain about it later. Her attention returned to him fully now, her expression sharpening slightly. You speak of survival as if it is separate from the conflict. It is, Sev said simply. The conflict is big, complicated, full of people with very important opinions. Survival is just not dying. Much easier to understand. For the first time, her gaze flickered, not with uncertainty, but with something closer to curiosity. That is an unusual perspective, she said. Sev smiled faintly. It's kept me alive so far. A distant signal pulse cut through the air then, sharp and resonant, followed by a low-frequency hum that Sev felt more than heard. He stiffened slightly, instincts kicking in. That doesn't sound friendly, he muttered. Her head tilted, ears shifting subtly as they caught the same signal. It is not hostile, she said. It is precise. That's not comforting, Sev replied. Before he could ask what she meant, movement appeared at the edge of the smoke. Figures emerging in coordinated formation, their silhouettes sharp and deliberate against the shifting haze. They moved with purpose, weapons raised but not firing, scanning the area with an efficiency that suggested they already knew exactly what they were looking for. Sev squinted. Those yours? Yes. Good, he said, exhaling. Because if they weren't, I was about to suggest we both start running in opposite directions. The figures closed the distance quickly, their armor reflecting the fractured light of the battlefield in muted tones. As they approached, something in their posture shifted, not relaxing, but adjusting. Their formation tightened, their focus narrowing until it centered entirely on the woman in front of Sev. They stopped a few meters away. One of them stepped forward, lowering their weapon slightly. You are injured, they said, their voice filtered through a modulation field that smoothed the edges of the sound. I am stabilized, she replied. Their gaze shifted to Sev then, sharp and assessing. You treated her. Sev raised both hands slightly. That's me, amateur medical professional. Very reasonable rates. The soldier didn't respond. Sev nodded. Tough crowd. Another figure moved closer, scanning the bandage with a device that emitted a soft, pulsing glow. The readings flickered, then steadied. She will recover, the second soldier said. There was a pause, then, almost imperceptibly, their stance changed again. Less guarded, but not entirely at ease. Sev noticed it. Okay, he said slowly, glancing between them. I'm getting the feeling I've stumbled into something I don't fully understand, which, to be fair, is most of my life. The first soldier straightened slightly, their attention returning to the woman. Your presence here has caused disruption, they said carefully. Sev winced. Yeah, that sounds about right. But she raised a hand, just slightly, and the soldier stopped. It was not disruption, she said. Her gaze shifted back to Sev. It was necessary. Sev stared at her for a second, then let out a quiet breath. You're really not helping my situation, he said. The soldiers did not relax after that. If anything, they became more careful, as though the situation had shifted from dangerous to complicated, which Sev suspected was worse. One of them stepped closer, just enough to make the distance feel intentional rather than cautious. Identify yourself, the soldier said, voice still filtered, still precise. Sev considered pretending to be someone more impressive, then decided he didn't have the energy to maintain that kind of lie. Sev, he said, human, recently promoted to person who probably shouldn't be here. No reaction. He nodded to himself. Thought that might land better. The soldier's gaze moved briefly to the medkit at his side, then back to his face. You approached without authorization. Correct, Sev said. In my defense, authorization forms are rarely available mid-explosion. Another soldier shifted slightly, the movement subtle but synchronized with the others. Their formation adjusted again, tightening around the woman. Not protectively, Sev realized, but structurally, as if they were reassembling a system that had been briefly taken apart. She remained where she was, unmoving, her attention still fixed on Sev with that same unreadable focus. You will withdraw, the first soldier said. Sev opened his mouth, ready to agree immediately, enthusiastically, and with great relief. You will not, she said at the same time. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Sev blinked. Okay, he said slowly, looking between them. I feel like I've become part of a disagreement, and I would very much like to not be. The soldiers did not respond. Their attention was entirely on her now. This is not protocol, one of them said carefully. No, she replied, it is not. That seemed to make things worse. Sev shifted slightly, trying to make himself smaller without actually moving. For the record, he added, I am very comfortable with protocol. Big fan. Love rules. Happy to follow them from a safe distance. No one acknowledged him. He sighed quietly. I tried. The woman, who was very clearly not just a random injured soldier, which Sev was beginning to understand at an uncomfortable speed, rose to her feet in a single controlled motion. The movement was smooth despite the injury, precise despite the battlefield that still pulsed with distant impacts and shifting lines. The soldiers adjusted instantly, their formation reconfiguring around her without a word. Sev watched this happen and came to a very important conclusion. Oh, he said softly, you're important. No one confirmed it. No one needed to. He rubbed his face with one hand, then let it fall back to his side. Right. Of course you are. That makes sense. I always end up in situations like this. I once fixed a navigation console and accidentally rerouted a diplomatic convoy. Whole week of paperwork. Her gaze did not leave him. You will remain, she said again, more firmly this time. Sev pointed at himself. Me? Yes. He glanced at the soldiers. They don't seem thrilled about that. They will adjust. The soldiers did not visibly react, but something in the air shifted, like a tension being compressed rather than released. Sev hesitated, then tilted his head slightly. Okay, I'm going to ask a question that might be incredibly stupid, he said, and I want you to remember that I am under a lot of stress when I ask it. She waited. Are you, he gestured vaguely at her, then at the soldiers, then at the general level of controlled chaos surrounding them, in charge of all of this? There was a pause. Then one of the soldiers spoke, their voice more rigid now. You are addressing... She raised her hand again, just slightly. The soldier stopped. Sev stared at that hand, then back at her face. That's a yes, isn't it? She regarded him for a moment longer, then said, I am responsible. Sev let out a slow breath, looking up at the sky as if it might offer an explanation for his life choices. Of course you are, he murmured. Why wouldn't you be? I can't just help a normal person. No, it has to be someone extremely important with a personal security team and a complicated cultural structure. He looked back at her, squinting slightly. Do you have a title? I feel like you have a title. I do. Great, Sev said. That's exactly what I was afraid of. Another distant explosion rolled across the field, followed by a surge of energy that briefly distorted the air around them. The soldiers shifted, scanning outward, their focus splitting between external threats and the internal situation. Sev took a small step back, then stopped himself. Okay, he said, holding up one hand slightly. Let's just... Everyone stay calm. I'm going to slowly remove myself from whatever this is, and you can all go back to doing very important things that do not involve me. You will not remove yourself, she said. Sev closed his eyes briefly. I really feel like I should. You treated me, she said. Yes, Sev agreed. That was a one-time event. Very situational. Not a long-term commitment. She took a step toward him. The soldiers tensed instantly. Sev noticed that. Okay, that's new, he said. They definitely don't like that. She ignored them. She stopped a short distance in front of him, close enough now that Sev could see the fine details of her expression, the controlled stillness, the focus, the way her attention remained anchored to him in a way that felt deliberate. You acted without distance, she said. Sev nodded cautiously. Still bleeding. You did not hesitate. I try not to when there's a clear problem. Her gaze flickered just slightly. That is not how others act. Sev shrugged. Others sound exhausting. There it was again, that faint, almost imperceptible shift at the corner of her mouth. Behind her, one of the soldiers made a subtle movement, as if preparing to intervene, then stopped. Sev noticed that too. I'm starting to think I've caused a cultural incident, he said. You have, she replied. Fantastic. But it is not negative. Sev paused. Are you sure about that? She held his gaze. Yes. Sev considered that for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, he said. That's good, I think. Probably. He glanced at the soldiers again. They don't look convinced. They will adjust, she repeated. Sev exhaled, looking back at her with a mixture of curiosity and mild concern. You say that like it's simple. It is not simple, she said, but it is decided. Sev blinked. Decided, he repeated. By you. Yes. He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head slightly. I really should have stayed in the transport, he muttered. The transport that finally arrived did not land so much as it asserted itself onto the battlefield. The air bent around it first, a distortion that folded light into sharp angles, followed by a low, controlled hum that pushed debris outward in a slow, deliberate wave. Then the vessel became visible, sleek, angular, and far too calm for something entering a collapsing front line. Sev stared at it for a second. That's definitely not mine, he said. No, she replied. Good, he muttered. Because I don't think they let me back on it anyway. The soldiers moved immediately, their formation shifting into something tighter, more formal. Lines straightened, movements synchronized, the kind of coordination that didn't just come from training, it came from expectation. Sev noticed that. Oh, he said quietly. This is the part where things get official, isn't it? No one answered. The side of the transport opened without a sound. A ramp extended, precise and clean, cutting through the chaos of the battlefield like it belonged to a completely different reality. Figures appeared at the top, more soldiers, but different. Their armor carried subtle variations, sharper lines, more intricate detailing. Not just protection, status. Sev sighed. Yeah, he said, definitely official. One of them descended first, each step measured, controlled. When they reached the bottom, they stopped several meters away and inclined their head, not to the group, not to the soldiers surrounding her, but directly to her. Sev blinked. Oh no, he said softly. I was hoping we could avoid that. The soldiers straightened. We have secured the perimeter, they said. You are to be evacuated immediately. She did not move. I will be, she replied. In a moment. The soldier's gaze flickered briefly, to Sev, then back to her. It was a small movement, but Sev caught it. Ah, he said, raising a hand slightly. I'm the moment, aren't I? No one corrected him. He rubbed his face again. This keeps getting worse in very specific ways. The new arrivals shifted subtly, their attention adjusting, recalibrating. Sev could practically feel the questions forming. Who is this human? Why is he still here? Why is she allowing it? He considered answering preemptively. Hi, he said, offering a small wave. I'm not supposed to be important. Still no reaction. Consistent, he murmured. She turned toward him fully now, stepping closer despite the subtle tension it caused in the surrounding formation. Sev noticed that immediately. Okay, he said, holding up a hand. Before you do anything else that makes them nervous, I just want to point out that I am extremely easy to replace. You probably have entire units of people who are much better at whatever this is. I do, she said. Great, Sev replied. Then we agree. You are not one of them. That's also true, Sev admitted. In most cases, that's considered a disadvantage. Her gaze held his, steady and deliberate. It is not, she said. Sev hesitated. There was something in the way she said it. Not reassurance, not even emphasis. Just certainty, the kind that didn't need to be argued. He shifted his weight slightly, suddenly aware that the battlefield, the soldiers, even the massive transport looming behind them, had all become secondary. The moment had narrowed again, focused entirely on a conversation he did not understand well enough to be comfortable with. Okay, he said slowly. I feel like we're having two very different interpretations of this situation. She tilted her head slightly. Explain. Sev let out a quiet breath. From my perspective, I found someone injured. I fixed the problem, and now I should leave before anyone writes my name down in something official. That is not your position, she said. Sev glanced at the soldiers again. They look like they're writing it down anyway. They are observing. Same outcome, Sev muttered. The first of the newly arrived soldiers stepped forward again, just enough to be heard without interrupting. Time is limited, they said. We must depart. She did not look at them. I am aware. Sev followed her gaze for a moment, then realized she wasn't looking at anything beyond him. Just him. That's a lot of focus, he said, shifting slightly under it. I'm not used to that. Usually people look at me and then immediately regret it. A faint shift touched her expression again. Sev caught it this time. There it is, he said, pointing lightly. You almost smiled. That's twice now. I'm counting. I am not smiling, she said. Almost smiling, Sev corrected. It's a technical distinction. Behind her, one of the soldiers adjusted their stance again, tension threading through the movement like a restrained reaction. Sev noticed that too. They really don't like this, he said. They will adjust, she replied. Sev let out a quiet laugh. You keep saying that like it's going to make it happen faster. It will not, she said, but it remains true. He shook his head slightly, then glanced toward the transport. Look, he said, lowering his voice just a little. You should probably go. You've got a very impressive ride waiting, and I've got whatever comes after this. She did not move. Sev, she said. He paused. It was the first time she had used his name. He blinked. Okay, he said quietly. That's new. You will come with us. Sev stared at her. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not sharply, just a brief, disbelieving sound that slipped out before he could stop it. Oh, he said. That's a joke. She did not respond. The laughter faded. Sev looked at her again, searching for something, anything that suggested humor. He found nothing. Oh no, he said, his voice dropping slightly. That's not a joke. No. Sev exhaled slowly, glancing at the soldiers, the transport, the entire carefully structured world that had just rearranged itself around a decision he had not been consulted on. I really, he said carefully, feel like I should have a say in this. You do, she replied. Sev waited. That does not change the outcome. He closed his eyes briefly. That's not what having a say usually means. It is here. Sev opened his eyes again, staring at her for a long moment. Then he looked up at the sky, which was still the wrong color, still fractured and unstable, as if reality itself was slightly misaligned. Okay, he said quietly. I'm starting to think this day is not going to get any simpler. Sev did not move immediately. That in itself felt like an achievement. There was a transport waiting, a formation of highly disciplined soldiers trying very hard not to react, and a woman who had just decided his immediate future with the calm certainty of someone accustomed to outcomes obeying her. He pointed at the ramp. Just to clarify, he said slowly, that leads to a place where I will almost certainly be questioned, analyzed, and possibly assigned a number. No, she said. Sev blinked. That was very confident for something you cannot possibly guarantee. I can, she replied. He considered that, then sighed. Right. You're in charge. I keep forgetting that part at very inconvenient moments. One of the soldiers near the ramp shifted slightly. This is irregular, they said. Sev nodded toward them. See, They agree with me. This is extremely irregular. I thrive in regular situations. Very predictable, very safe. You do not thrive, she said. Sev paused. That felt unnecessarily accurate. The soldier took a step forward, careful, controlled. Your presence introduces variables. Sev raised both hands. I have been told that before, usually right before something explodes. It is not acceptable, the soldier continued. She turned her head slightly. Not fully, just enough. It was a small movement. The soldier stopped speaking. Sev stared at that interaction, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'm learning. That's a look. That's definitely a stop talking now look. It is efficient, she said. I can see that. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt structured, like everything had already been decided, and the rest was just the process of catching up to that decision. Sev looked at the transport again. It was cleaner than anything on the battlefield had any right to be, its surface reflecting distorted fragments of the chaos around it without being touched by it. He could see faint lines of energy running along its hull, shifting in patterns that suggested constant recalibration. Out of curiosity, he said, does that thing have a kitchen? There was a pause. Yes, she said. Sev nodded thoughtfully. Okay, that's a strong argument. The nearest soldier turned their head slightly. That is not relevant. It is extremely relevant, Sev replied. I have been eating compressed nutrient blocks for 3 days. If there is real food involved, I am significantly more cooperative. It is not a negotiation, the soldier said. Sev gestured toward her. Everything is a negotiation. I'm just very bad at the formal version. Her gaze returned to him fully. You are not negotiating, she said. You are deciding whether to trust. Sev blinked again. That sounds much more serious than I was aiming for, he said. It is simple, she replied. Simple, Sev repeated. Right. He shifted his weight, glancing once more at the battlefield behind them. The noise had changed, not quieter, but more distant, as if the conflict had moved just far enough away to stop being immediate. He could leave. He could walk in the opposite direction, find another unit, disappear back into the general confusion of people trying not to die. That was the normal choice. He looked back at her. She hadn't moved. She hadn't needed to. Okay, Sev said slowly. I'm going to say something very important, and I want you to understand that I mean it. She waited. This is a terrible idea. Yes, she said. Sev paused. That was not the response I expected. It remains correct, she added. He let out a short laugh. You're very direct. I appreciate that. Makes things easier to process. He took a step toward the ramp. Every soldier noticed. The shift was immediate, not aggressive, but alert, like a system recognizing a change in input. Sev felt it, the subtle tightening of attention around him, and raised one hand slightly. Relax, he said. I'm cooperating. See? Very cooperative. They are not relaxed, she said. I noticed. He stopped at the base of the ramp, looking up at the interior of the transport. It was brighter inside, the lighting soft but precise, revealing surfaces that seemed almost too smooth, too intentional. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was damaged. It was like stepping into a different version of reality where things made sense. Sev glanced back over his shoulder. If I go up there, he said, I feel like my life is going to get significantly more complicated. It will, she replied. Great, he muttered. He looked at her again, then at the soldiers, then back at the ramp. Okay, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Let's make a list. Option 1, stay here, continue surviving by luck and poor decision-making. Option 2, follow the very important alien woman with the very organized army onto the very advanced ship that definitely has better food. He nodded once. I hate that this is a difficult decision. You have already decided, she said. Sev frowned slightly. Have I? Yes. He considered arguing, then stopped. Yeah, he admitted. Probably. He took another step, placing his foot on the ramp. It felt solid, stable in a way the ground outside no longer did. Behind him, the soldiers shifted again, but this time it was different. Less resistance. More adjustment. Sev glanced back one last time. If this goes badly, he said, I just want it on record that I had concerns. It will not go badly, she replied. Sev tilted his head. You sound very sure about that. I am. He smiled faintly. You've said that about everything so far. And I have been correct. Sev let out a quiet breath, then turned and started up the ramp. Okay, he said. Let's see what happens next. The inside of the transport was quieter than Sev expected, which immediately made him suspicious. Not silent. There was a low, steady hum beneath everything, the kind that suggested enormous systems doing very important things. But controlled, contained, like the noise had been given instructions and was following them. Sev stepped fully inside and stopped. Okay, he said softly, turning his head slightly as he looked around. This is already better than anywhere I've been in the last. I don't even know how many hours. The floor adjusted under his weight, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that he felt it. A subtle shift, like the surface was learning him. He looked down. Oh, good, he muttered. It's thinking about me. That's always reassuring. Behind him, the soldiers entered in precise sequence, their formation reassembling with practiced efficiency. The ramp retracted without a sound. The outside world, chaotic, loud, uncertain, sealed itself away as if it had never been part of the same reality. Sev exhaled. Right, he said. Too late to change my mind now. It was too late before, she replied, stepping past him. Sev turned slightly to follow her movement. The interior opened up as she walked, panels shifting, corridors aligning in ways that felt almost responsive. Not mechanical exactly, more like the ship was anticipating her. Okay, Sev said, pointing lightly as the wall to his left reshaped into a smooth, continuous surface. I'm going to need a moment to process that. Your ship is rearranging itself. It is optimizing, she said. Of course it is, Sev replied. Why wouldn't it be optimizing? Everything is optimizing today except me. One of the soldiers moved closer, positioning themselves just slightly to Sev's side. Not blocking, not guiding, but present in a way that suggested both were possible if needed. Sev noticed immediately. I appreciate the enthusiasm, he said, glancing at them, but I promise I'm not planning to run. I don't even know where I would go. The walls are cooperative. They are responsive, the soldier corrected. That's worse, Sev said. Responsive means they're paying attention. They are, Sev blinked. I was joking. They are still responsive. Sev nodded slowly. Right, of course they are. He looked ahead again, focusing on her as she moved through the corridor with the same controlled precision she had shown on the battlefield. The difference was the environment now matched her, ordered, structured, intentional. You fit here, Sev said without thinking. She slowed slightly, just enough to acknowledge the statement without fully stopping. This is my command vessel. Sev let out a quiet breath. Yeah, he said. That tracks. They reached a wider section of the interior, a space that opened upward into a layered structure of platforms and shifting light. Displays hovered in the air, not screens exactly, but projections of data that folded and unfolded in complex patterns, adjusting as they moved through the space. Sev stared at one of them as it shifted, numbers and symbols reorganizing themselves in response to something he couldn't see. I have no idea what any of that means, he said. You are not required to, she replied. That's a relief. Another figure approached, different from the soldiers, their attire less armored, more specialized. They paused at a respectful distance, their posture precise. You are stabilized, they said to her, their gaze briefly scanning the bandage Sev had applied. The treatment is unconventional. Sev raised a hand. I prefer the term creative. The figure did not look at him. Sev lowered his hand. Tough audience continues. It is effective, she said. The figure inclined their head slightly. Yes. There was a pause, then, almost reluctantly, it is also unshielded. Sev tilted his head. Unshielded. They mean I didn't wear gloves, he translated for himself. Yes, that's correct. I find gloves reduce dexterity and increase frustration. The figure's gaze flickered to him briefly, then back to her. That is not the concern. Seb frowned slightly. I feel like I should be concerned. You are not, she said. That's reassuring, Seb replied. I think. The figure hesitated, then stepped back, as if deciding that further discussion was either unnecessary or unwise. Seb watched them go, then looked back at her. Okay, he said, lowering his voice slightly. I'm starting to notice a pattern. People say something, you say something else, and then they stop saying things. It is efficient, she said again. You really like that word. It is accurate. Seb smiled faintly. Fair enough. He shifted his weight, glancing around the space again, taking in the controlled movement of everything, the way the ship seemed to breathe without actually moving, the way every system operated with quiet precision. Then he looked back at her. You said this was your command vessel, he said. Yes. Seb nodded slowly. So that means, he gestured vaguely around them. You're not just important, you're extremely important. She regarded him for a moment, then said, Yes. Seb let out a quiet breath, running a hand through his hair. I really need to stop underestimating situations, he muttered. He looked at her again, more carefully this time, as if trying to reconcile the person in front of him with everything that implied. You could have told me earlier, he said. You did not ask correctly, she replied. Seb blinked. There's a correct way to ask that? Yes. He considered that, then shook his head slightly. I don't even know what that would sound like. You would not use humor, she said. Seb paused. Why, that explains a lot, he admitted. There was a brief silence between them, not uncomfortable but more aware now, more defined. Then he gestured lightly toward the bandage at her side. How is it? He asked. She glanced down briefly, then back at him. It is holding. Good, Seb said. That was the goal. You achieved it. Seb smiled faintly. I try. She stepped closer then, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to shift the space between them again. Seb noticed immediately. Okay, he said quietly. You're doing that thing again. What thing? The reducing distance thing, he replied. Your people seem very concerned about it. They are adapting, she said. Seb let out a small laugh. You keep saying that like it's a process with an endpoint. It is. And what happens when they're done adapting? Seb asked. She held his gaze. They will understand? Seb tilted his head slightly. Understand what? There was a brief pause, then she said, Why I allowed you to remain. Seb blinked. I'm not sure I understand that yet, he admitted. You will, she said. Seb exhaled slowly, glancing around the ship one more time before looking back at her. Okay, he said. I have a feeling I'm about to learn a lot of things I wasn't planning on learning today. Yes, she replied. Seb nodded once. That seems to be the theme. Seb discovered very quickly that command vessels did not believe in quiet conclusions. They believed in continuity. Everything that began somewhere had to go somewhere else, preferably in an organized, well-documented way that involved far too many people observing it. He stood near one of the central displays, arms loosely crossed, watching lines of data shift and reform in ways he still didn't understand, but had accepted as normal. That, he realized, was new. A day ago, he would have questioned everything. Now he just nodded occasionally, like the ship might appreciate the effort. Okay, he said under his breath. I don't know what you are, but I support your enthusiasm. The display adjusted slightly. Seb squinted. Did you just react to that? It did, she said from behind him. Seb didn't turn immediately. I was hoping you'd say no. It is learning your patterns. That's worse, Seb replied, finally looking over his shoulder. Now it's not just responsive, it's curious. She approached at the same steady pace he had come to recognize. Controlled, deliberate, and somehow more present than anyone else on the ship. The space adjusted subtly as she moved, systems recalibrating without needing instruction. Seb watched that happen, then shook his head slightly. You don't walk, he said. You reorganize reality around you. That is inaccurate, she replied. It feels accurate. She stopped beside him, close enough now that he didn't instinctively step back. That too was new. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed softly around them, its systems flowing in quiet coordination, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. "The battle is stabilizing," she said. Seb nodded once. "I figured. Things stopped exploding near me, which is usually a good sign." "It is more than that," she added. "The command structure has adapted." Sev smiled faintly. "You mean people stopped arguing and started listening?" "Yes. Miracles happen," he said. There was that shift again at the corner of her mouth, more visible now, less restrained. Sev pointed lightly. "That's definitely a smile." "It is not," she said. "It absolutely is," Sev replied. "You're getting better at it." She did not argue this time. Sev leaned slightly against the edge of the console behind him, more relaxed than he had any right to be. "So," he said, "what happens now? You go back to commanding everything, and what? Get politely escorted out with a warning not to touch any more important people?" "You will not be escorted out," she said. Sev sighed softly. "I was afraid you'd say that." "You have been assigned." Sev froze for a second. "Assigned," he repeated. "That sounds official." "It is." He closed his eyes briefly. "I knew getting on this ship was a mistake." "It was not a mistake," she said. Sev opened one eye. "That's easy for you to say. You're the one doing the assigning." "You are correct." Sev exhaled, pushing himself upright again. "Okay," he said. "Let's hear it. What am I now? Assistant? Consultant? Unintentional problem?" She met his gaze evenly. "You are my personal field advisor." Sev stared at her. Then he laughed. Not a short laugh this time, but a real one. The kind that slipped out before he could stop it. "That's not a real position," he said. "It is now." Sev shook his head. No, that's not how that works. You can't just invent a role because you, what, liked how I used a bandage? It is not about the bandage. Then what is it about? She held his gaze for a moment, and this time there was no hesitation, no searching for words. "You act without distance," she said. "You see the problem, and you resolve it. You do not wait for structure to permit you." Sev tilted his head slightly. "That's usually what gets me in trouble." "It is also what changes outcomes," she replied. He was quiet for a second. Then he looked away briefly, glancing at the shifting displays, the ordered movement of everything around them. "You've got people for that," he said. "Better people. Trained people." "I have people who follow structure," she said. "I do not have people who step outside of it without hesitation." Sev smiled faintly. "That's because it's a terrible idea most of the time." "Not always." He looked back at her. She hadn't moved. She didn't need to. "You're serious," he said. "Yes." Sev let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair again. "You know this means I'm going to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, right?" Repeatedly. "Yes. And I'm probably going to ignore at least half of whatever formal protocol exists on this ship." "Yes. And your soldiers are definitely going to hate me." "They will adjust." Sev laughed again, quieter this time. "You really believe that?" "I do." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "I believe that you believe that." There was a pause, then he added, "And I guess that's enough." The words surprised him a little as he said them, but they settled into place easily, like they belonged there. He straightened slightly, looking around the command space again, not as an outsider this time, but as someone trying to understand where he fit within it. "All right," Sev said, clapping his hands together once, lightly. "If I'm staying, I have one condition." She tilted her head. "State it." He pointed toward the corridor they had come from. "You said this place has a kitchen." "It does." Sev nodded firmly. "Then I want actual food, not nutrient blocks, not optimized intake solutions. Real food." She regarded him for a moment. Then very slightly she nodded. "Accepted." Sev smiled. "Good, because I'm not saving anyone on an empty stomach." There it was again, that almost smile, clearer now, no longer something that needed to hide. The ship adjusted around them, systems shifting, adapting, continuing forward. Sev looked at her one last time, then out at the layered displays of a war that was no longer just something he was surviving. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's see what happens next."